Hello, everybody. Welcome to Greatness Glory podcast. This episode is the second part of Art of Balance based on the book Art of Balance, which I wrote, going over all different aspects of balance, creating happiness, success, wisdom, abundance, and overall evolution of us as human beings. I have my good friend Kevin here again on this podcast. Welcome, Kevin. Thank you for joining me for this podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I felt like we left so many questions unanswered last time, so I appreciate a follow-up podcast to finish some of the questions I had.
Thank you. Did you have a specific question you like to discuss?
Yeah, I mean, not to get into anything esoteric, but in your book, you had a very interesting quote from Shakespeare, and you were alluding to the fact that things are not really good or bad, inherently speaking, right? It depends on how we see them, and we even give things meaning that we may perceive as a sin or a virtue, right? So, having grown up traditionally as someone who's always seen things as good or bad, I wanted you to please expand on this notion of how our perception can create this notion of good or evil. And if you could refer back to that beautiful quote from Shakespeare, I would appreciate it because I thought it was really a gem.
Thank you. See, this is a bit of deep question, and it might take a while for some people to really digest it. We're not saying that certain things, like evil things that you see happening, are not necessarily bad, but I'm saying whether you call something good or bad, very much it also depends on your point of view. Like, I already have made actually a video. It's on my YouTube channel. It's called The Universal Meaning of Virtue and Sin, which is a very interesting topic. I think everybody need to think about it, because when you, for example, refer to religions, especially like Abrahamic religions, you see there are so many things that are considered sinful, which are more of like traditional things based on their system of belief, versus something that is a bad thing as being harmful universally. So, for example, if you are Jewish, for example, and you consider that in Saturdays, the sacred Shabbat, if you are kind of lighting a match, it's sin and God is going to punish you for it. This is not a universal thing. This is not how the universal laws work. These are religious beliefs or the rules for that specific system. But when you say, for example, if I harm somebody, is it bad? That's depending on how you say bad is. But considering the normal definition of bad, what we refer to as bad, obviously it's a bad thing, because like if you harm somebody, if you believe in karma, you're harming them and you're creating a negative consequences for yourself, and in some way it's coming back to you even at the moment that you're doing it. Or if you get angry or you are hateful, you're literally poisoning yourself with negative toxins in your brain and blood, creating an imbalance in yourself. So when we look at it that way, we see that if you go over that Shakespeare quote, for example, nothing is good or bad, but thinking make it so. It's actually very deep, that so many of the things that we say, these are bad, like some of those things that I said, religious things, some of them are cultural things. They're not necessarily good or bad. We just having a kind of personal opinion of those things. With our minds, we label it as good or bad. For somebody, maybe they're thinking if they do a specific ritual or prayer or something, or go to a specific place of worship, they are being a good human being. And that could be very much just the meaning they give to that process. For somebody else, that thing might not have any good meaning. It can be very different. So to conclude, the important thing is to understand the universal meaning of virtue and sin. And I studied so many religions, so many scriptures, so many traditions. And what I understood is that universally, anything that you do to harm yourself or others, it's a destructive thing. Maybe we don't even call it bad. It's your choice. You can do it. The universe has given you free will. You can harm yourself, you can harm others, or you can do good things to yourself and others. Anyways, there are consequences. There are many philosophical systems, and when you look at this from a higher perspective, things in universe, they don't have any built-in meaning. We give meaning to things. So you call that thing bad, it's your choice. It's just something stupid. If you harm yourself or others, it's coming back to you anyways, and it's a destructive thing. So maybe the universal meaning of virtue and sin, we can replace it and say constructive or destructive things, right? Let's give an example and then I end with this. There is a huge misunderstanding of so many of the sexual things in many religions, for example. Like so many people feel guilty about so many of the sexual things culturally and religiously. But it's just like an interaction between two human beings, or whatever interaction that one might have even with himself or herself,
You
right?
mean the taboo of being sexual and physical
Correct.
in
But like you see, when you look at people's mind, majority of people have a lot of guilt about this topic. The animals don't have a guilt about it. They don't think about it this way, and
yeah.
they're not doing anything bad. But if you ask me, okay, can there be bad things about it? Of course, if we consider bad thing a destructive thing, when you, for example, you're being invasive, like talking about like a rapist, it's a bad thing. It's a destructive thing to yourself and others in many ways. Some people, for example, say, is it masturbation a bad thing or good thing? Again, that one also is not a simple subject to discuss. Depends on the context, like the dosage that we discussed in the last podcast, right? Or we might get into subjects like porn. So there are so many studies, as I also mentioned in the book, that say, okay, porn can be also harmful and be an addiction. But that also is not a black and white thing to say, okay, if somebody is once in a while watching some porn, is it destructive, constructive? I mean, there are so many factors that are involved. So some of the subjects, again, just like the dosage thing or that poem that I said last time, depends on so many things, where, how much, and so many other factors. So when you think about it, I can't say like it's absolutely for everything, and maybe it is, but for majority of things you see, good or bad, constructive or destructive, it also depends on the context. For example, is killing a bad thing in itself? Yeah, for a vegan or for a Buddhist or for a Hindu or for so many others, killing even an insect is a horrible thing.
Yeah.
For so many other religious people, for example, in Judaism and Islam, it's even a virtue if you kill many animals in the name of God or sacrifice them. I mean, even some religious extremists, they think killing humans sometimes is okay.
Yeah.
So you see, killing in itself, is it good or bad? For example, human beings also eat animals, also eat plants. And there are so many studies that came out and say plants have consciousness and even feeling, not in the same way that animals have, but they also feel the pain and things like that. So somebody may say, oh, I eat only plant, so I'm not causing suffering to the other beings. And that might not even be true. You can see everything from different perspectives, and things are not as black and white to say this is bad just because of this is good just because of that.
Yeah. To clarify for the audience, you're not saying like, okay, murder is is not wrong, right? From an ethical and moral perspective, but what you're saying is essentially what we give value to in terms of what we understand is good or evil may not necessarily be good or evil. Like, for instance, you see a tiger for his survival hunt down a prey, right? That's not inherently bad. It's about the meaning we give it. So then the question comes up about why we as humans, right, with the limited knowledge we have, cannot just like, throw our hands up and say we don't know. Why can't we just say we don't know for a second and let the creative process take over? That like sense of discovery and exploration, just like a child would, to really
Yes,
discover his or her surroundings.
that's a very good thing that you got into. Actually, that takes me to the other very important concept discussed in the book. I think I called it the art of not knowing, which
Yeah.
basically says probably the greatest thing that a human being can do for themselves to become more conscious and evolve, to increase their perception, their capacity to see things, to think outside the box, is to stop coming to conclusions about everything they know and experience. We tend to feel secure in coming to conclusions, especially firm conclusions about our knowledge and information that we have. And we tend to feel secure if we stick to something and feel like we have the answer, especially when it comes to religious beliefs. Majority of people are horrified of questioning their beliefs because they're afraid they might be wrong. And what if everything that I believe is wrong? And that, in most people, that brings up a sense of horror one way or another. Say, I give this example. If you want to become wiser and find the answers, you need to start looking at things just like a kid, like you mentioned. And you see, even Jesus said that kids are the ones that are like kids are going to be the ones that enter the kingdom of God, which is
Mhm.
not somewhere in the heaven. It's a state of being. And we have to develop that curiosity and always just questioning everything, not only questioning external things or what other people say or the scriptures, but even more important than that, we need to start questioning whatever that we think, not once a day, not once every hour, constantly. Everything that pops up in our head, we need to question it instead of just thinking whatever that I'm coming up with, I'm doing is already the correct thing. I already know the answer. I discussed this in the book, especially for spiritually minded people, philosophical minded people, people who are trying to get a real answer for their lives. When you stop believing in so many things that you just learned from religion, scriptures, and even in a scientific term, if you want to make jumps in your discoveries or things like that, when you start questioning, when you starting to reconsider your thoughts, your conclusions, and you absorb more knowledge, you study more, you think more, but you don't come to conclusion and say, I got the answer. And a lot of times, so many of us have come to that state. And if you have clarity, you see, even when you get excited and say, I got the answer, after some time, you start even questioning that answer. And ultimately, whatever we call enlightenment or the ultimate state of freedom or being free, at least in our minds, and not suffering, is a state of letting go of all conclusions and just being, not to be happy with some belief, just to feel confident. Because what religions did, for example, they give a sense of confidence to so many people, and it's sometimes better than, I guess, not having any confidence in anything. But at the same time, also, it freezes your mind and you will be stuck. Because imagine if I say there is a huge panda spirit or some being in the supernatural realm, I might call it God or whatever, maybe it's elephant, I don't care. This is always protecting me and bringing me clients and whatever else, however it serves you. It is actually going to work for you, but it's not necessarily the truth. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. And to take a step back and give it a practical spin, you talk about money, manifestation, and success. And the keywords that I heard you use is a belief and believing, which I want to separate from the notion of faith and having belief in a higher power, a God, right? Which is a different topic. Going back to this money, success, manifestation, how do our belief systems create obstacles for us due to the meanings we may give money? Like, I believe you spoke about money versus greed and success. And I myself, for instance, have so many negative and limiting beliefs around money because inherently I've always been given the message that money is root of all evil. And would you expand on that?
Yes, one of the greatest discoveries that I think human beings have made, but it's only known to a very few people now. And I think as we evolve, it's going to become more mainstream, is that our beliefs manifest our experience of life. The thing about money and success, there can be hundreds, thousands of beliefs that you have in your subconscious. Even sometimes you're not conscious of it. That's why we call it subconscious. But they have been programmed into you since childhood by your surroundings, family, your school, society. And those beliefs, they basically prevent your brain to function in a specific free way outside the box, and creating that confidence that, for example, I can do this. That's why so many people go to do something and then they become discouraged. Some people give up very quickly. Some people don't even try it. And this brings me to that important concept. Honestly, there are no external obstacles in life. There are no money problems. There are no success problems. There are no relationship problems. Everything is here. Because when you start seeing, after especially you do a lot of inner work, you're seeing that the reason that you're having a problem in your relationship or you're attracting a specific type of people is really because the way that you think, and the way that you think decides how you act, where you go, and so many things of that nature. Or when you see that I'm not doing some marketing for my business in a proper way, or I find excuses to not do certain things. Sometimes you even pray for a solution. The solution comes to you not one time, even 10 times. And then because you have some resistance, you avoid the solution. Or you try it once and say, oh, it doesn't work. Just an example, you said that a belief that they say money is root of all evil. First of all, that quote is law of money is root of all evil. But in any case, it's not correct.
Yes.
Why should you call money root of all evil? Why not ignorance is root of all evil? Why not just like greed in general root of for evil? Or I don't know, jealousy? Why just blame the money? And you see, if you have such a belief, then whenever you try to become successful or create wealth, you subconsciously avoid it or create some conflict, or you come up with some conclusions to not do it. I've seen in relationships, for example, there are people who say, all the girls are like that, all the boys are like that. And then you see they keep experiencing the same type of like boys or girls in their relationships because they have that belief that, okay, all this type of people are like that. They keep attracting it. You see, this attracting things because of your beliefs, it's not even a law of attraction thing or something supernatural. There is a great book called Psycho-Cybernetics, where the author there talks exactly how our beliefs manifest our lives, even in a scientific way, not nothing like energy, supernatural, or anything like that. And just to add one more thing for people who are interested, you see, I studied a lot of healing arts, and I also did a lot of things with like energy healing, different styles, different modalities where you use different methods for healing. And after a few years, I learned something very interesting. A lot of people don't get healed because they have some subconscious block that prevents them from getting healed. And I just add this as an example. One time I read there was one lady that she was working with a healer or multiple healers for a long time, and she had cancer, and they were doing many things like herbs, energy healing, on things of that nature, and she wasn't getting any improvement. And there was a smart healer which started working on her subconscious beliefs, and then she asked her, doing kind of like a psychiatric analysis type of thing, and found out that since this lady got sick and she was like bedridden, her husband and her kids started giving her more attention, more love, and that's something that she never had in her life. And she was not able to let go of that cancer because she thought, even subconsciously, that that cancer is serving her. She got healed after clearing that subconscious block. This is even a scientific thing. Our thoughts, these neurons in our head, our brain, our pineal gland, whatever it is, it's controlling our DNA, our genetics, our smallest functions of our body. So if you have a block, your machine of the body, your body computer, the software, which is your thoughts, is going to program your body to stay in a certain level of consciousness and being, for example, being sick. But when you start changing it, you experience so many changes. For example, if you want to learn so much about this, you can study the works of Dr. Joe Dispenza. He has done tremendous amount of precious work explaining all these things, how our thoughts and beliefs create both our physical and external reality, whether it's health or wealth. So you see, if I want to keep talking about this, I gotta go for hours. It's a very interesting topic. It's enough to say we need to start questioning our thoughts, and questioning our thoughts not only makes us free, not only give us more solutions outside the box thinking, but
Mhm.
it can make us more evolved as a human being.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Isaac. Going back to that question about money and prosperity, I just use that as an example, but, prosperity and abundance is not just money. And my question is, in this age of information with artificial intelligence, as we're all bombarded by all these new ways of thinking, right? Why is it so hard to take action, even though you're aware of a certain belief system, like whether it be money, abundance, relationships? Why do you think beyond the ego, we have, trouble like taking action?
I think mostly it actually comes back again to those the subconscious beliefs or the beliefs that we have in our perception. If you want to put it in a simpler way, maybe just everybody has some small or big traumas from their past. And you will be amazed that simple things that happened in your childhood, so maybe somebody in the school told you even a small thing and said, "You're stupid." And that thing, you accepted it, you got offended by it, still controlling your decisions. It's very interesting. These days, the subject of psychedelics and psychedelic therapy is becoming very big, and I think it's a very good thing in many ways, even though it can have also negative consequences if done incorrectly. The reason that psychedelics create healing, it's because they help you to see your life from a higher vantage point, getting outside of yourself, and at least for an hour, 2 hour, seeing things differently. And there are people who have done these psychedelics and ayahuasca and things of that nature hundreds of times, but they have not changed much. Do you know why? Because they don't act upon those inspirations that they received. Because if you don't act to change, then it doesn't matter if God comes and show you the whole universe and you don't start doing something. It's better if you do very small thing, such as starting to meditate for 5 minutes a day, than seeing the whole secrets of the universe and not doing anything. So, a lot of times we don't act, or we create problems for ourselves because subconsciously we have some blocks. Sometimes if we feel like we don't deserve it. Sometimes we feel it's not possible. Sometimes we have a fear of failure. Sometimes we have a fear of success. Those fears, those resistance, things like that, they keep blocking us. Another example, this has been spotted in many people. Some people have a subconscious block of becoming wealthy because they think if they become wealthy, they are more endangered, because like wealthy people are more in target of thief, and I mean all different types of danger. And I mean, there are a lot of crap that we make up in our head, and we limit ourselves with all those limiting thoughts. And this is where value of therapy, if done right, comes. Value of studying, because when you study a lot, you keep receiving new information and challenging your current point of view. And the value of doing things like the type of meditation or practices that you start analyzing your thoughts and questioning them.
Isaac, my next question revolves around self control, which you mentioned, and how too much of it can be suppressive. And wanted to know what is the difference, why people do this, and what is a good technique or methodology for sort of staying in the middle path, meaning not feeling you're in full control, like as a control freak about everything in your life from work and relationships and money, versus going through life like a mindless robot, like going through the motions, on a daily basis. And how does it look like bringing consciousness into our daily lives, and sort of exposing the darker subconscious ideas and notions that give maybe a false meaning to our reality?
See, first of all, suppression versus over controlling. I rather everybody be more over controlling, even though I'm contradicting myself. But being not in control is in many ways worse. But what I mean by this, when I discussed it, say evolution in so many ways has a lot to do with how much control you have in your thoughts, in your body, and in your social life. If you even look at this from the perspective of neuroscience, you see that the part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, where it's related to control, this is more evolved in human beings. And We all have like a reptile brain, the back of our head, which controls our subconscious things, instinctual things. And when you see, for example, at least according to science and some beliefs like that, animals don't have that part of consciously controlling things and making decisions. They just react. They just react to everything. That's why you see, if you corner an animal, just about every time they might attack you or they might become scared. But if you do it with the human beings, you get 10 different reactions from 10 different human beings. Because
Mhm.
what? Again, their subconscious programming and how much control they have over their actions. So is it good or bad to have self control? It's definitely good. But when it becomes like becoming a control freak, becoming obsessed with controlling everything in the life, then it becomes a bad thing, again, destructive thing, because we don't have control over the whole thing, the whole universe. We don't have control over other people. You need to have control over the things that you can control. For example, how you react things, how you interpret things, but you cannot control other people's behavior. No matter how much you want to control other people so you feel better and more secure, you cannot accomplish that completely. If you have kids, you know that. You cannot control them completely, no matter what. And so many times you see in relationships, no matter how much you try to control the other person, if you don't like some of their behaviors, you'll never able to change those people. So you can control how you take it. Like for example, if I don't like noisy places, I have an option to not be in noisy places. If I have to be there, I cannot go and destroy all the noises and tell the garbage trucks to not come and pick up the garbage at 6 a.m. But I can put a white noise machine or put a headset or something, you know? So there are limits to how much we can control. And for our psychological health, we have to understand that there are only certain things and aspects that you can control. And some of them, you gotta let it go. And you know, even spiritually speaking, let me end with this. Even if you believe in a higher power, you do your best in life, okay? You do your best both in the spiritual growth and also in your social growth or finding relationships or whatever else. But at the end, if you believe in a higher power, or just let's just call it universe, you say, I did my part, I'll just surrender the result to that higher power or the bigger picture of everything.
You. And that brings up the question of, for those of us who are into spirituality, right, and find meaning in that, how do we balance, growth spiritually, our in our relationship with God, the higher power, the creator, creativity, and also at the same time balance it with work and money and relationships. So what is the best way or technique in your experience to balance a spiritual life with the everyday mundane reality of needing to make money and pay the bills?
Balancing these things, spirituality versus material life, is only an internal thing. You can work for 24/7 also if you're happy with it and still evolve spiritually if you give a different meaning to work. We call that karma yoga in the systems of yoga, working but considering your work as an act of service, not being attached to the end result of the work, or even offering your work to God or whatever you believe. That's one way to look at it. But in another way, we can say it's also about prioritizing what's most important. Like if you want to evolve spiritually and you know that certain things are not in alignment with higher way of living, let's say stealing something or being dishonest, and even though maybe you're doing business and you know, if I be a little bit dishonest, I might get more money, and then you sacrifice that for your spiritual growth, that will fuel up your spiritual growth. So it's about priorities. Or you know that I want to become more spiritual or achieve a higher level of consciousness. Let's get rid of that word spirituality that has a lot of different interpretations. If you want to achieve a higher level of consciousness and evolution, you know that I need to put time and energy in it. But if I put too much time and energy in it, that all the time I'm just thinking about that, and you want to be like a monk exactly, but you want to at the same time be successful in your society, in your work, in your relationships, even though some people say you can do that, you cannot actually exactly do that. How can you live exactly like a monk and then also live like a successful businessman? Because people who said that you can live like a monk within the society and just do everything, indulge in everything, probably they didn't understand that being a monk means completely cutting off of the desires for material fulfillment and going 100% inwards. That's why I don't believe in that. So you cannot be 100% inwards and at the same time bringing a lot of your attention and energy to your business problems, your relationship problems, and so on. So you need to balance it.
How do we know it's okay to push ourselves? Or, like, you mentioned, comfort is not a bad thing, but too much comfort may be negative, right? But at the same time, for those of us who set huge goals and have big dreams, for personal development, in our relationships, in our business, how do we find that middle path, so that we don't get burned out, chasing those big dreams, right? But at the same time, we don't get too comfortable and lazy, as especially now that technology is really changing everything.
If I'm not wrong, you're referring to that concept in the book Self Care versus Sacrifice. And this is actually one part of the book that, in so many ways, I think it also resonated with myself when I wrote it. Majority of us maybe care more about ourselves, but not even in a constructive way, because we think, okay, self care is just about keeping all the money and the comfort for ourselves. That's not what I mean. But there are some other people who also sacrifice a lot for others, which is a spiritual quality. And it's a very good thing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but sometimes people lose the balance. Like they need to give some time to their own rest, their own financial well-being, but they spend too much, or they lend a lot of money to everybody, or they spend a lot of their time just helping others while their own life is a mess. Sometimes there could be, financial issues. You need to prioritize your own financial well-being, but at the same time you say, okay, let me just be a saint, and even though I'm really in a bad situation, let me give even more. And it's a good quality, it's not a bad thing if you want to, again, kind of live like a monk. But you need to also consider self-care, because if you don't be aware of the importance of the self-care, then again you lose balance. For example, if you know that you need to rest 7 8 hours every night, and then for some reason you don't do that, maybe also because you want to do some work for somebody, or doing some sort of support for a friend, I don't know, and then you keep not getting enough rest, and after some time maybe that will cause your health to decline, your brain to not be as clear as it should be, and then it creates an imbalance. In that way, it's also not good, right? Because if you're sacrificing yourself and sacrificing your self care to do something for others, or let's say even for things like you want to become an athlete or you want to lose weight, and then again the other end of extreme, you overdo it. And then that will cause some issues because you don't understand that there should be a balance between self-care and pushing. And you see all these concepts, they are in many ways connected. Self-care versus sacrifice, over controlling versus like just being indulging in everything. They're all connected. I hope I answered that.
Yes, absolutely. You know, that part of your book, the self-care, really resonates with me because I've been such a volunteer for over, 20 years. I've done so much pro bono legal work, consulting work, and it's a passion that's dear to my heart, right? And, a lot of times when it comes to self-care, I feel shame, fear, and guilt because I feel it's wrong, not to take some time for myself, or focus on that self-care. But how do we not forget about ourselves on the spiritual path? And I recall one time you had mentioned how self-care is important for spirituality. Could you expand on that?
If the spiritual growth, it all depends on your state of being, your state of energy, your state of mind. Imagine if you dismiss rest, having a quality diet, creating balance in your time and relationships, not working too much, then growing spiritually becomes way more difficult because you lose your balance. If you consider, for example, one important part of spirituality to be your daily practices, it could be like a physical yoga, it could be meditation, it could be some prayers, it could be studies. If you consider it like a daily routine, you see that when you push too much, then you won't be in a good state of mind, body, energy to give enough attention and time to those aspects. And then in that way also, it prevents your spiritual growth. Art of balance is an art. It's a very subtle thing. We need to pay attention to everything so it doesn't push us out of balance. Again, referring to the previous podcast, it's important that we develop our intuition to really see if we are doing too much or too less in everything that we do.
Thank you. And one of the notions you refer to in your book is emotions, and how our emotions can be a key to bringing consciousness into our daily activities. And you brought up shopping, for instance, that a lot of people do shop therapy nowadays, right? Whether it be on Amazon or going outside, as a way of regulating their emotions and well-being. What is your opinion in terms of us as, spiritual beings having a physical experience on this earth, being on a path of evolution, as Christ explained it? How do we really manage our emotions in a healthy way without the fear, shame, and guilt that may drive us into bad habits like overspending or identifying with materialistic things to a point where we lose our own identity, who we are, where we came from, and what we are here to do.
Yes, there are many things that can be told about that, and many of them are discussed in the book. Basically, it's about creating that state of balance. But to say one small thing, majority of us, all the time, our attention is outwards. Either it goes to other people, or it goes to the work, or it goes to school, or whatever else. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
So if all of our attention goes outside, we never get an opportunity to analyze our own lives and our own thoughts. So we can never adjust it. That's why it is very important if one wants to grow to spend even a few minutes a day, not being busy with something, but paying attention to yourself. This is, for example, mindfulness meditation. You can even lie down or do it anywhere. You can just, instead of thinking about all the problems, trying to bring your attention to your thoughts and to your feelings. Even you spend 10 minutes a day, lie down or sit if you're going to fall asleep, but you can even lie down 10 minutes a day, just instead of thinking about how to fix this and that or how to address this issue or that issue, just pay attention to your feelings, how you feel, pay attention to your thoughts, and try to just be an observer to your mind instead of getting drowned in the thought process and then again going to, oh, how do I fix this? What do I do tomorrow? And this is a process. I think if people do this even for 1 year, 10 minutes a day, it's going to change their lives forever. Trying to get out of just being in the cycle of thoughts and just being an observer of the thought process and the feelings that are going on. And you will see you start to get some insight about the nature of who you are, and it will give you an opening and space to create change.
Thank you. And my final question as a follow-up to that is balancing social life as social creatures, right? What's demanded of us from the external environment, but
Okay.
also balancing dependence and asking for help. Like, how do we on the spiritual path find that sweet spot where we're not like fully isolated like a monk, which is, you always mention, is very difficult nowadays, although not impossible. But how do we continue on the spiritual path yet maintaining a healthy social life as well as healthy independence while knowing we can ask for help when needed?
See, some people don't ask for help again because of those limiting beliefs. Because some people think, oh, if I ask for help, that's going to bring down my status or represent me as weak or other beliefs, right? But there's nothing wrong with asking for help and support. But there are some people also who are overly dependent on everybody, For example, I am in IT field also, right? For many years, over 20 years, I've been in IT and I have a lot of skills in different aspects of IT. And I had so many friends that used to come to me for solutions. And like one specific friend, one of my best friends, I always remember this and laugh because I used to joke with him about it. Like all the time, he would come to me, send me very, very basic questions, which he could like Google and get the answer in 2 seconds. Even like very, very basic questions. Like I said, bro, why don't you use Google? There is something called Google. Why do you want me to answer all of your questions? You're becoming overly dependent on me while you can spend 1 second just typing something and Google it, or even these days with AI, you can get a perfect answer from AI. So that's also an example. Like, why be too dependent? Or in relationships, there are some people who are overly independent in relationships. They don't even put enough time and emotional energy in the relationship. And there are some people who are, as we call them, like needy all the time. They're just dependent on the other person to feel good. I say they try to extract happiness from the other person. You know, both of these situations are not good. So let's end this podcast with saying I cannot say what Art of Balance is completely in one podcast or 10 podcasts or 10 books. It's all about paying attention to ourselves, how we think and how we react, how we eat, and so many things that been discussed in the book. So the key is self-awareness. Let's say we call that metacognition in science, where some people all the time they're just on autopilot and they just do everything unconsciously. If you increase that metacognition, if you start to see yourself and how you're doing from outside with practicing mindfulness, doing journaling and things like that, you will start to create a new you. That's the point of awareness and self-analysis, which are critical for all type of growth in life.
Thank you, Isaac. No, I really appreciate this opportunity again. And I think the word art is the key word here because it's not something that can only be read and understood, but also has to be felt on the emotional level, and that it has to resonate with you. And I would love in the future to dive more deeply into the belief systems that we may not be aware of, how we can shed light on those older chains that we can break in order to seek our freedom. So thank you, and I appreciate your time and
Great.
all the knowledge you've
Thank you
shared.
so much, everybody. We'll see you soon.